Hello and welcome to the Light 'em Up Lounge. My name is Reinhard Pohorec.
And I'm Christian Wohlrab.
Today we talk about pairing.
Reinhard, cigar pairing, a super common topic among enthusiasts as well as first-timers. So tell us, what do we have here to pair this wonderful cigar today?
Well, we have a table full of goodies. We start with our little flag setup right here. These are all non-alcoholic options because I think it's super important to also explore the world of non-alcoholic pairing options for a premium cigar. We have a pink grapefruit juice all the way down here, almond milk, tomato juice, and a very classical Coke. And then obviously once we get into the alcoholic range, beautiful Guinness stout, a bit of an oddball from Germany, good old Jägermeister, two very, very special sherry wines from Andalusia, an old Amontillado and a Palo Cortado, red vermouth, and a 20-year-old Glengoyne single malt whiskey.
All right, so many questions. In preparation for the show, I looked up what Winston Churchill was pairing his cigar with, arguably one of the most famous cigar smokers out there. And I kid you not, for the morning he was smoking cigar and having whiskey soda. For lunch,
Most likely whilst he was still in bed.
For lunch, champagne. Afternoon, cognac. And for dinner, again, champagne. So I'm not sure.
A bottle each?
He's a great role model, but certainly he kept his pairing to this side, not so much here. But I just found that interesting. And I also looked up, and I'm sure you've seen this, the great Austrian Arnold Schwarzenegger was at Cigar Aficionado talking about cigars and tequila. And he famously put his cigar in tequila. Do you remember that?
Brushed it off with the tequila.
Is that just a wild thing to do, or what's your take here?
Let's not get too much into that, but this is not necessarily how we interpret cigar pairings. We'll do it slightly differently today.
Okay. Well, so we've heard Churchill took cognac, took whiskey. I think those are arguably some of the more famous pairings, and many people think of those.
Rum, coffee, that's kind of like where it stops for a lot of people.
So let's get right into it and do some alternative pairings.
Let's start at the very beginning. A great cigar does not need anything. And my good friend Claudio Scroy, always makes the point that a well-blended cigar hits all the right spots on your palate, gives you enough salvation, and you don't even have to drink a glass of water with it. Now, that's a very theoretical scenario, and most people enjoy cigars in a very leisure setting and environment. They want to have a good time, so you might as well pour a little glass of vino with it, have a beautiful spirit, or enjoying that social experience of having a cigar and a conversation together. What you want to do when you pair your cigar with a beverage is enhance the experience. And ideally, 1 and 1 does not equal 2, but create something that's much bigger and certainly more than just the sum of its parts. When we approach pairing, I think there's 2 major schools of thought. Either you complement or you contrast. Complementing means you pick certain notes that you find in the cigar and you're looking for the exact same notes or attributes in the beverage that you choose to go along with it. Contrast being the complete opposite, obviously, where you enhance certain characteristics of the cigar by bringing in another element which the cigar does not have as a contrast, and then these two together create something of a new synergy. So both have their pros and cons, most certainly, and depending on your mood, depending on your previous experience with both the cigars and the beverage part, you can go either way. And not one of them is better than the other. It's just a means of playing around with it. And there's a lot of different facets to that, which we can get into, all the way down to the pH level in your mouth, for example, which drastically changes the way you perceive a cigar. And of course, what you ate before you light up, what you drank before you light up, or what you have whilst you're doing it will change your experience. So let's just establish that as kind of like a standard, and then from there we go into all these different options.
Okay, well, let's get right into it. Production team has put one glass for the two of us, and that team is me. So, what
sharing is caring, my friend.
What do we start with for this cigar? And maybe first, what type of cigar? What's the body here?
So we picked a cigar from RomaCraft made at the Nicasueño factory in Nicaragua. With a Brazilian Matafina wrapper, and as you can see also from the burn, this is quite an oily, dark, beefy wrapper with a lot of oomph to it. Underneath you have an Indonesian Bezuki binder and an undisclosed filler blend. It's a cigar with a lot of depth and richness to it, not overpowering, but with a lot of substance and many different notes, a lot of complexity going on here, and we can play on all these different notes. There's certainly a dark, bitter chocolate component that's registering on my palate. Interestingly enough, though, for me at least, I find that there's quite a nice acidity going on here, so it keeps your palate engaged. It's not tiring to the point where you feel it's just overwhelming. And so the blend in and by itself, I think, is very successful in offering balance whilst it's rich and complex, and it has a lot of beefiness going on.
Yeah, the first thing I thought when was to me like a rye whiskey, there was some sort of wheat that I felt like a
type of grain that's
type of stuff,
but more on the spicy side.
I would agree. Yeah. So anyway. You were saying, and how do we start?
We can actually go to the pink grapefruit juice all the way down the aisle where you're at. And what you will see with this is that slight acidity and that freshness, borderline piquancy, almost when you think about pink peppercorns, for example, where you have the peppery quality, but you also have that bright, fruity, borderline citrusy quality. That's what I find in the cigar. And when you take the grapefruit juice, that will underline these elements and give an added layer of freshness, but also with a bit of grip and that touch of bitterness towards the very back.
Okay, now first question.
I'll just dig in here.
First the zip and then the smoke.
Do both and play with it. Take a sip and then a puff on the cigar. See what it does, how it works. And then change it around and do it in the opposite direction. What are you registering?
Okay. Wow. I mean, the acidity is...
Is that a good or a bad?
Certainly the grapefruit is very intense. So I would say most cigars might actually not be able to compete with that flavor. I think if you go with let's say,
A
light
mild
cigar, mild
Connecticut
cigar,
shade.
and this, I think this might not be the way to go. Whereas this is actually still there. It's still there despite the intensity.
What I find beautiful about this, the grapefruit juice just brings like a zing of freshness and excitement to the whole thing. It's a bit like a wake-up call. And then once you... So what I actually did is I took a sip of the grapefruit juice first, and then I took a puff on the cigar. And then all of a sudden, that rye bread quality comes out even more. I find that it supports that particular taste profile or that taste description that you used earlier, and it brings it out in a beautiful way.
I think I like it best towards the end of it. You know, now I have just a little bit of that grapefruit juice, and the cigar comes up a little more. And at the beginning, to me, the acidity was quite overpowering. But
play it the other way around now. Take a puff on the cigar first, and then wash it down with a sip of the grapefruit juice. And here I find that it's just a beautiful palate cleanser.
Interesting.
And it just, like a finishing touch.
Interesting.
And it sets you up for the next go round.
Feels like the acidity was not so strong. Now, obviously, it was like the third sip I had now, but still, it felt less intense because it was sort of preoccupied with the cigar. I don't know how to better describe it. Fascinating.
We'll actually skip one and we'll go right to the tomato juice here. Now, this is interesting on two levels. Not just the aromatic profile and taste sensations, but it's the texture here that's going to be very, very interesting, because that's another layer that we need to take into consideration when enjoying cigars and beverages. It's also about the texture. And when we speak about complementing or contrasting, keep in mind the body, the mouthfeel, the richness or the lean, elegant profile of the cigar, whichever direction it might be, and see how you can complement or contrast mouthfeel and texture with the pairing. The tomato juice has more of a velvety, thick texture to it. So with the intensity of the cigar here, you're complementing the richness and the body of the cigar and the beverage. Also keep in mind that the tomato, having an acidic pH level, will bring a certain element of freshness and acidity, but it wraps it up more in a more velvety way than the grapefruit juice does. The grapefruit juice is more like a razor blade, giving you that refresh of your palate and kind of like cuts through, whereas the tomato juice, it hugs you, it embraces you, and it gives you that pillowy, velvety sensation underneath, building more like a carpet on your palate where the cigar can then play on and dance on.
Interesting. So my first thought was tomato juice and pepper. Like, you know, you get on the airplane. It's a thing for some people. So that to me was the first dimension, sort of, that added to the cigar. Very, very interesting.
I love that you brought up the Bloody Mary analogy already, because indeed, tomato and the tomato juice always rings like, okay, let's have a Bloody Mary. And it's that savory connotation. And the cigar has elements of that. It has, for me, a touch of beefiness or meatiness to it. We'll get to that in a second. I have a little surprise for you. But the tomato juice beautifully plays with that. But what I'm also registering, when you think about the finish now and what's lingering on your palate, the texture, the velvetiness of the tomato lengthens the experience, and I have a lingering sensation on the palate here. So it's still there. It's still working. It's like an enhancer,
Yeah.
and it carries the experience. But also what's left, what's lingering, all of a sudden is much sweeter.
Yeah.
And the aftertaste compared to the grapefruit juice
True.
has more of a sweet, mellow, sun-dried tomato-esque
100%.
experience.
Sun-dried,
So
you're right.
It's the richness and the pepperiness and the spice of the cigar that all of a sudden gives the tomato juice a sweeter impression.
Yeah.
And instead of that rather acidic quality first, suddenly you have that rich sweetness that's left on your palate and that keeps lingering.
Yeah. Super interesting. And again, this is the test. The cigar is there. Like, it's not like, oh, wash that away and then again. No, it's totally adding and stacking on top of each other. Like, now again, there's, it's more sweeter. This one, certainly the bitterness prevailed over time, whereas the acidity sort of was taking a step back because of cigar, I believe. So here, very, very mellow. I agree. Very fascinating. I've never had a tomato juice in a cigar before.
On the other hand, if you go to the Coke now, that in and by itself will have much more sweetness than what you experienced here.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see how that registers and compares when you bring it together with the cigar and when the beverage itself introduces more of a sweetness as opposed to the two acidic qualities we had first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, this is becoming almost more like a caramel candy. I think it becomes, the texture becomes bigger. Like, not bigger is the wrong word, but it just becomes a bit more sophisticated. I'm thinking caramel now. With the Coke, so not quite as a sensation compared to the tomato juice that I'm having, but maybe it's because the
I think it's less dynamic. The first ones obviously play a little more on your palate. This one is almost a little more one-dimensional. Mm-hmm. They enhance themselves nicely, and I'm with you. You get that caramel-like sweetness, almost like a burnt caramel on your palate, but also because of the inherent sweetness of the Coke, the cigar for me all of a sudden becomes drier and a little more pronounced in its bitter chocolate, peppery aftertaste qualities.
I agree. The cigar now is more dominant paired with the Coke as compared to the other two, where I felt like the drink was taking the upper hand, if that makes sense. And certainly the caramel is quite rich. And I like the burnt caramel analogy here. Yeah, I like that a lot.
But what I find very interesting here, it plays a vital role as to whether you take a sip first and then a puff, or you do it the other way around. You just took a puff and now wash it down with the Coke. And you'll see that all of a sudden, this again, because of the acidity, because of the fizz, becomes the palate cleanser. And it washes away these lingering bitter qualities of the cigar and the pepperiness. And it gives you a burst of freshness on your palate again. Still with that sweet caramel note underneath, but more of a palate cleanser rather than having the smoke and the liquid mingle and interplay.
Got it. Well, exciting, and I'm looking forward to the last one here in that row.
We'll get to that in a second, but before we actually do that, speaking of the meaty quality, I brought a little surprise, and this is biltong. So you have the actual meat, and I think you want to play with the tomato juice here and have a little snack. And I very much endorse the idea of having these little finger food snacks when you talk about pairing and when you really want to elevate a cigar experience. It doesn't have to be complicated. You don't need a 3 Michelin starred chef cooking a 7-course tasting dinner, but to enhance the cigar experience, every once in a while introduce a little finger food with a beverage, and then you create a triumvirate and a very holistic experience that sort of like adds to the overall charm of the experience. You have to do the talking now.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So interesting. Also here, the cigar holds up. I mean, this is so intense, this is so flavorful, but the cigar holds up like, it's amazing. You know, it's sort of like even 50-50 in my mouth. Whereas again, I felt with the Coke, it was more like 80% liquid and 20% was left of the cigar to the point of it washes away a little more.
Now, call me weird, but all of a sudden, the cigar brings something that I really haven't tasted before. There's almost like an unripe banana touch to it now, like a borderline green, starting to turn yellowish banana mellowness. Not quite sweet. It still has a bit of that funk, but that's a totally new sensation that I'm picking up here. And I want to be clear about something. Everybody's palate is different, right? And oftentimes people will say, what the F? You know, it tastes like tobacco. It tastes like a cigar. It's smoke. What's all your freaking fluff nonsense with green unripe banana and sun-dried tomatoes and, a layer of schist on a beautiful balm Sunday morning on the slopes of Moselle River and all that shenanigans, right? We're talking about analogies. We're talking about certain ideas where the aromatic perception and your taste perception triggers an emotion or a memory. And when we talk about sensory descriptions, it's not that somebody packed green banana into that cigar or black pepper or whatever, but it's us trying to verbalize what we perceive so that we can have a conversation about it and communicate some of the memories that are being triggered. And there is no right or wrong. And some people get confused or they get upset because I don't feel something and XYZ reviewer posted that the cigar has black pepper and cinnamon and I don't get any of that. That's fine, you know? And at the same time, nobody is the authority to say the cigar has this note and that note and that's the end. If I taste cinnamon and you get vanilla, you're an idiot. That's not the way it works, right? So we're just trying to speak in analogies and express our ideas. And when you just enjoy the cigar and you write down certain flavor notes, that is a means for creating the pairing because you need certain guidelines, you need certain rails where like, if this cigar gives me a touch of that pepper and a touch of that beefiness, all of a sudden I have an idea because I'm thinking in previous experiences and analogies. So that's where the tomato juice or the biltong or the beef jerky could come in as a flavor enhancer.
Yeah, I see.
But again, it's not about this is the right way, that's the wrong way, this is what you're supposed to taste. I'm not here to tell anybody what they're supposed to taste. Everybody's palate is different, and depending on your previous experiences and how you have built your inner vocabulary and your inner sensory database of descriptors and analogies, that's how you start to work on that, just to be clear.
Well, I don't recall this being spicy at all when I had it before drawing on the cigar. So now, to me, it almost feels like the chorizo type of flavor. Then if you don't like pepper, now this is for you, because it's actually not pepper, because it's just a peppery spice. It's less intense, and there's beef that has like a pepper crust.
Rim
stuff
crust,
so those are things that come up that are very obvious. You know, the meaty flavors, of course, are there, but it feels like something that it is, but it isn't. And so I'm exploring while I'm going through the things that I have experienced, you know, and to your point, you know, somebody who hasn't had chorizo, well, then they will taste something different. You know, maybe they go to a banana or something like this. But yeah, thanks for bringing that out. That is quite fascinating, actually, and I haven't had beef jerky quite at a time.
Now, the milk. One of the reasons that I brought milk is some of the master blenders in the Caribbean, in the manufacturing countries at a cigar factory, use milk to reset their palate in between tasting different fumos or pure grade samples of tobaccos. Now, I think they do it out of happenstance, or because they feel, well, it works for them, but probably without thinking about the logic behind it. What's interesting about the milk, I spoke about the pH level and how it affects your perception of taste. Depending on the type of tobaccos that are used in a blend, they can lean more towards the acidic or alkaline side. Usually the smoke with the pH level in your mouth can go into different directions and create different sensations. Milk in general sits more on a neutral 7 pH, probably borderline alkaline pH level in your mouth. So that's a means of setting your palate on neutral and balancing out either acid or alkaline tendency on your palate. In this particular case, I did not only choose plain whole milk for its pH neutral qualities and properties, but this is an almond milk where you get a touch more of that roasted, nutty quality to go with it. And I kind of like went a step further than just regular plain milk, but we introduce an aromatic quality of that roasted, nutty quality as well, which I think goes well with the richer profile that you find in the cigar here.
So I feel, again, a sense of caramel, but a lot less intense as with the Coke. Feels like some of those yellow candy,
caramel, bonbon,
type of things. So very pleasant, actually, very pleasant. Even sort of Baileys, if you will, you know, without alcohol, but it got that milky texture, of course, that certainly brings up Baileys and those type of liquors, and a lesser caramel taste than the other. So wow.
Think again about the texture component here. As with the tomato juice, you have a very velvety, calm and luscious mouthfeel on the milk. So I feel that if you want to tame down, not in a negative way or in an overshadowing way, but if you want to calm down the experience ever so slightly, this is a very good option.
I see.
And it just creates a bit of that velvety, pillowy-like quality on your palate again.
Silky. It's
silky. Yeah, that's a good word.
It is. Very nice. Well, Reinhard, we got 6 alcoholic beverages here. Let's pick maybe 1 or 2 here before we wrap up today.
We don't want to do the Winston Churchill thing, and
this is right. We gotta keep a few for another session for sure.
And obviously, that's a good segue for all our viewers, get creative and start playing with a lot of these. I think this is a good selection here. One thing to be said about alcohol is also people have a tendency to go all in when they have a cigar and a drink. And by that, I mean high proof spirits, cask strength whiskeys, peaty, smoky, and it becomes like a battle of titans. It becomes a clash because the cigar is already intense. The smoke, to a certain degree, is an irritation for your sinuses. It's a challenge in terms of the grip, in terms of the texture, the bitterness, the almost tannic quality of the smoke. And the same is true for alcohol. It's an irritation for your palate. And then you introduce woodiness because of cask maturation, depending on how porous the wood is, how spicy the spirit becomes because of prolonged maturation or very intense charring in the barrels. So for me in general, I like to step it down a notch and don't go into these super high barrel strength, cask strength spirits in order to not have that extreme fight and clash for who takes the upper hand in the pairing. And that's why I think a stout, as in this case, where you have that caramelly, dark, malty richness to it, but with a lower level of alcohol and a little bit of sugar, can very much enhance that cigar experience. A liqueur, obviously, again, dark, roasted, cinnamony, star anise, clove, nutmeg notes, and the sweetness underneath that can offset some of the bitterness from the cigar. Beautiful, beautiful pairing. But I want to dig into something that I think is probably the most undervalued and underrated cigar pairings, and that is sherry. What is sherry? We're talking about a fortified wine from Spain, from the so-called sherry triangle. And most people will say, oh, it's like port. Yes. Well, yes and no. It's a fortified wine, so it sits and it lives in the same category as port. But where port is predominantly sweet, and most all port varieties have ample sweetness, most sherry wines are actually dry. I know that sometimes people think about cream sherry and what your British grandma used to drink around Christmas. That's not necessarily what sherry is all about. And here we have an incredible, highly sought after, borderline collectible quality from Equipo Navajas, sort of independent bottlers of the best sherry casks that you can find in Andalusia. And this is a Palo Cortado. So this wine spends a certain period of time, a certain time of its lifespan, aging under flor, which is a layer of yeast that forms on the wine when the barrel is not filled all the way to the brim. So there's a little bit of residual space, and the foam, that yeast layer, forms a protective layer on the wine. And the yeast also consumes a lot of what's in the wine. Sugars, for example. So the wine becomes even drier and crispier, and it builds up amino acids. And there's an element on a molecular level in sherry, which is called diketopiperazine. I know that's for the geeks with the thick glasses, but what it has is flavor enhancing properties. Almost like an umami quality where it boosts what's already there. It lifts everything up and it enhances the entire experience. And I know I'm talking too much, so start pouring.
Well, now
and let's dig into it.
That is quite...
And then after it ages under flor, sorry to cut you off, but just to finish that thought, is the flor dies off and the wine continues to age oxidatively. So under the impression of oxygen. And that's when it gets its color, that's when it gets its concentration, that's when the nutty notes, that's when the dried fruits notes come in. And that's what you immediately get on your palate here. I mean, this is like crazy concentrated juice.
I could smell it when I just opened the bottle. It felt like a huge burst of scent coming out, and
just by smelling it, you're a wine geek. What are some of the initial thoughts that come to mind on the aromatic quality?
The genie that came out of the bottle here. So taste versus flavor, very different. Flavor.
I think we should actually do a separate show,
Probably.
little cliffhanger, a separate show just on what's aroma, what's taste,
Yes.
what's flavor, because we always get mixed up in the terminology, right?
So
we'll do a separate show about that, but just
Yeah.
continue your thought, please.
We should, because we don't have enough time to get to all the others, but smell, certainly rather sweet. Taste, as you said, no sweet at all. No sweetness, just
Bone
punch,
dry.
Very, very dry.
What's the
And-
reason you think it smells sweet? Because obviously we don't smell sweetness per se. Sweetness is a taste that we're registering through the receptors in the mouth. But I guess it's the aromatics or certain spices, certain dried fruit qualities that remind you of, if you were to eat something like a dried prune or dried figs, it would be sweet.
Yeah. So smell rather like dried fig, raisins, this type, and then pairing it with a cigar, I still feel it's a raisin, but it's a raisin that's not sweet, and raisins obviously contain a lot of sugar. So the depth it created here, very, very fascinating. I think here, for me, in the mouthfeel, the most was happening compared to the non-alcoholic drinks. Now, I'm still having a richness of different flavors. Quite actually hard to pinpoint what it is, but it's still happening. And
It's very complex.
it is powerful.
It's very long.
What's the alcohol level here?
Just shy of 20%.
22%. So I think it really pairs nicely. And
of
be
course,
honest,
the alcohol here also works as a flavor enhancer.
Yes. And to me, it's probably not something I would have just like on every other night, where like a wine or beer or whatever. But with the cigar, I think it becomes even more balanced and even more exciting, because this is certainly special. Like I haven't had anything like it before. Amazing.
Beautiful texture, firm grip on your palate, bright acidity. It's like
Yes, it is.
razor sharp. Here we are on the money. And then that aromatic burst, dried fruits, roasted nuts, caramelized nuts. Also like green walnuts with that slight bitter touch.
I was going to say, well, you said bitter. When you caramelize nuts in a pan with some brown sugar and you overdo it just a little bit,
And the sugar gets
a little
a
bitter.
touch too dark.
Exactly. This is exactly where this is for me. Reinhard, this has been a pleasure.
There's one final element that I need to talk about.
Go ahead.
When you age sherry for such a long period of time, there's something which in the sherry triangle they call rancio. Rancio is that quality that hints towards umami. It hints towards that meatiness and gaminess, but it's just through prolonged periods of aging, when you start to form long molecule chains, you start forming aromatic qualities that you haven't had before, and it just becomes incredibly complex and very, very rich with that dark, gamey quality to it. I think it's just phenomenal. And if only more people understood sherry, how you get incredible value for money with it, and a beautiful, beautiful cigar pairing. For me, this is an absolute highlight.
Well,
which is actually the
they
reason
all
I
were.
finish it.
So thank you for sharing and taking us into that rabbit hole of cigar pairings. This is it for today. A lot more to cover in future episodes. So thanks everyone for joining in. And with that, we're gonna light them up.
Light them up.